caught in adultery, and these religious leaders drag her into the middle of this huge court where Jesus is teaching probably to thousands of people, and right in the middle, they throw her right in the middle, and they tell Jesus, hey, Jesus, this woman committed adultery. What are you going to do? Can you imagine the woman? Like, what the heck? Right? You know what Jesus does by writing something on the ground? What happened? Where's everybody looking? Everybody takes their eyes off of this woman and starts to look at where Jesus is writing. So Jesus immediately pulls everyone's eyes off of the woman and towards himself. You want to talk about shame? Imagine being the woman caught in the act of adultery, dragged into the temple by these religious leaders, tossed in the middle of Jesus' teaching. Every eye probably fixated on her presumably naked body, right? By drawing attention to himself, Jesus gives her an ounce of dignity in a moment where she desperately needed it. In a moment when it seemed the whole world was caving in on her. In a moment where the world was crumbling on top of her. If you read the Gospels, there's a story of a bleeding woman. And this bleeding woman bled for 12 years, the Bible says. And she heard about this man named Jesus. And this woman, for 12 years, just imagine 12 years of bleeding, right? She's hemorrhaging, right? And as she's bleeding 12 years, she's ostracized. Her family has left her, right? And the Bible actually says she was probably wealthy because she spent all of her money on doctors and shamans and all these people that she thought could heal. And out of desperation, with no money but nowhere else to go, she hears about this man named Jesus. And she's heard stories of this man named Jesus that has healed people in the past. And so this woman says to herself, if I can just make my way and touch his clothes, maybe I will be healed. In broad daylight, she walks amidst the crowd, and if she's caught, she's dead. She's not supposed to be in broad daylight. And she touches Jesus, and the Bible says a power surged through her, and she finally became healed after 12 years of suffering. But you read that account, you know what happens? It's like there's a crowd following Jesus, and then she's healed, and then one person recognizes this bleeding woman, and then another person recognizes this bleeding woman, and they start to move back, and they make that, you know that Korean circle we make after we eat at a restaurant. We go outside, and we make that Korean circle for like 45 minutes to an hour, right? That Korean circle, that's what's being made here, but except it's Jesus and this bleeding woman right in the middle. And people are waiting for Jesus to stone her, to give her just a piece of his mind. And you read that account, you know what Jesus says? Daughter, you are healed. Go in peace. Now imagine that. 12 years, no friends, no family. But Jesus says, daughter, daughter. Jesus has a way of bringing dignity back to people that are found shameful by this society. Not only that, by refusing to give a quick response, Jesus avoids justifying the question. You know, you ever notice, if you read your Bibles, you know how most of the times that Jesus answers a question? He doesn't answer the question. You ever read your Bible? You know how Jesus answers the question? Jesus answers questions with other questions. He'll ask a question, right? Jesus, how are we going to feed all these people? We don't have enough. Well, how many loaves do you have? That's not an answer, right? The Pharisees would come to Jesus. Jesus, right? Do you dare to break the commands of the law? And he'll say, do you dare to break the commands of God? That's what I do. In ministry, I learned from Jesus. When people ask me questions, I just ask them another question. I don't answer the question. It's just easier that way. There's a reason why Jesus does that, right? Or or he just gives answers that have nothing to do with the question. Someone will ask a question and he'll just say something else that makes no sense, right? And this is what he does here. This is what he does here. And notice that Jesus' patience works. His silence agitates these leaders to the point they keep questioning him, and they keep shouting and making themselves look more and more foolish. And so finally Jesus stands up in verse 7, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And the Bible says they just get up and leave one by one. They just leave, right? Church, over the years, 1,000 different people have asked the same question 1,000 different times. How can God love me after all that I have done? What does God feel towards me when I fail? Does His grace eventually run out? If not, why am I still ridden by shame? And it's a question this woman had to have asked as she stood in the midst of this remaining crowd. Remember, guilt focuses on behavior, but shame focuses on self. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. And John chapter 8 tells us that even when we have sinned, Jesus Christ comes to our side. Can I get an amen? Amen. And if He comes to our side, church, listen carefully. If Jesus comes to your side, goes to your side, you are not a mistake. You hear me? You are not a mistake. God stands with you. Jesus stands with you. And so with some strategic movement, Jesus relieves this woman's shame and provides her with dignity. And He tells her flat out, you made a mistake, right? He tells this woman, go and sin no more. You made a mistake. You have sinned. But He also tells her, for neither do I condemn you. You are not a mistake. Yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you were caught in adultery. That is a mistake. But woman, you yourself, you are not a mistake. As followers of Jesus, we sometimes stumble into thinking that it's us fighting against our sin and fighting against God, right? That's how we think sometimes. When we sin, this is what we think. We think, man, it's me versus the sin I committed and I have to deal with God. That's what we think, right? It's me versus God and the sin, right? And you may do well for a while and feel that God is pleased with you, right? When you're fighting against sin and against God, but you're going to lose. Just FYI, you're going to lose. But you fail and feel that God is angry with you. It's a no-win battle because it produces shame-based faith, right? That's why you're always ashamed of yourself, because it's always you versus sin and God. But you will always lose because you can never beat God. Okay? You can never beat God. Can I get an amen? Amen? And because you can never beat God, if that is your thinking, you will always lose, and there will always be shame in your life. Does that make sense? It can only make you feel worse, alone and beaten. But the Bible tells us that because of Jesus, there's been a radical change. It's no longer you versus sin and God, but the gospel teaches us it's you and God versus sin. And if it's you and God versus sin, then it's possible for you to live in victory. Can I get an amen? But isn't that profound? No? Oh man, I prayed about that. You and God for sin. Thank you. Let me illustrate, let me make an example with two things. Children and marriage. Okay, first children. That author writes this: the trusting child does not have a worry in the world about whether he is smart enough or handsome enough, whether he has accomplished enough with his life or been good enough to be acceptable to his parents. He trusts that the someone who holds him, warms him, feeds him, cradles him, and loves him will accept him again and again and again. Trust is the inner child rediscovered in an experience of grace. Okay, let me expound upon that. I told you I have 3 children. And all the parents would agree, generally speaking, young children with good parents are free. Free. in their simple innocence, they don't think about making themselves look good enough for their parents, right? Good enough to be accepted. They just are, right? My three kids have three different personalities. My eldest, Karis, she's a very introspective, very deep thinking, kind of legalistic girl. Right? She's kind of like me. But she's the type that will, like Christmas, right, at school. I think she gets confused because it's all Asian. She thinks it's church sometimes. They do like Christmas activities, and then I'll pick up Karis from school. Karis, how was today? How was the party? Appa, Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? I was like, no, Santa Claus doesn't, because I taught her that earlier. But that's what I told the other kids. And they were arguing. I told them only God is real. Santa Claus is not real. And I thought to myself, I mean, you're right. You preach it, but you gotta know when, right? And she'll remember all these different things from, like, she's only 6, but she remember. But remember 3 years ago when you said this and you promised me? I was like, girl, you were 3 years old. When you're 3, I don't say stuff for you to remember. But that's her. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's really annoying. Very annoying. And then Kayla, my second, she's like the opposite, very extroverted. She's very girly. If Kara's a little bit tomboy, Kayla's a little girly, and she does this thing where anytime we take a picture, Kara says, no. Whenever I take a picture, Kayla says, wait, am I cute? Am I cute? And then, when we're not doing anything at home, I don't see Kayla for a little bit, and then she comes down the stairs, look at me, am I cute? In her little mermaid dress, and, her costume. Get out of my way! Gosh! In my head, I think, you are so annoying. Yes, you are cute. Of course you are cute. And then Moses, I told him, the big head. He does this thing where, because he has 2 older sisters, like because him and Karis, our age gap is, like 4.5 years, something like that. But him and Kayla are like, less than 2 years, so they're like friends. And so, Kayla will come, am I cute in my dress? And then literally a minute later, I see Moses running down, following her, with Kayla's headband. And Kayla dressed him in that tutu. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not why I had a son. You are going to play sports, my boy. You are not wearing a tutu. And then so I'm ready, going to take a picture, and I say, oh, no, I cannot take it. I cannot let the world see that my boy cross-dresses. And it's embarrassing. So I said, I take it off and I throw it. Moses, get over here, take off that tutu. Kayla, get over here, don't dress your brother in a tutu. And Karis said, guys, you guys are too loud, I'm trying to watch the Appa, you said don't scream at me, why are you screaming at me? Karis, get over here, stop being smart. All that to say, in their simple innocence, they don't ever think, am I good enough today to be accepted by my dad? When my kids need to be held, they always jump on me and my wife, especially when they run into the bedroom while we're sleeping. Moses sometimes, there are times where I'm sleeping and I just feel this lump on my back. And I'm thinking it's just the blanket or the pillow. And I realize I'm sleeping on Moses. And I get upset. I'm like, you weren't there when I fell asleep. Why are you here? Right? And sometimes, because he's really big. And so when we're sleeping, like literally he'll punch me in the face. He'll kick me in the face. And in that split second where I'm half asleep, half awake, and I'm upset because someone punched me in my face, and my initial reaction is to punch back, and what are you doing here? Well, for some reason, I don't picture him thinking, does my daddy love me? Right? Does my daddy love me? Oh, I have a dirty diaper now. Maybe Dad won't want to hold me, right? Oh no, I spilled the food. Maybe Amma won't like me now. I don't think when they raise their hands to be held, there's a fear of them thinking, oh man, maybe I'm not good enough for you. They're free. That's gospel living. One more story these days with Moses. I told you, I think he's a little slow man. But he does this thing where every time I change his diaper, he just waits. And then right when the diaper's off, he pees. On my face. It's funny. You ever been peed on your face? But what makes it more mad is that when he does it, he has this little smirk. Like he was waiting this whole time. Just waiting until I did it. And he like smirks and he laughs, and I'll yell at him sometimes. I tell him not to do that. But after the moment passes, he's just a kid. What am I going to do? Throw him out the door because he peed? It's my fault for not potty training. I don't know. But you remind him, I remind him after time and passes, Moses, I love you. You may be a little slow, but I love you. I accept you. Church, that's the gospel. He knows that. That's the gospel. Our Heavenly Father will still love you even when you're messy. Even when you just go pee wherever you want to pee. Right? That's security. There's no fear of rejection. The power of shame is taken out of its roots. Can I get an amen? Amen. Right? Marriage. Right? One Christian author writes regarding marriage. Marriage is meant to be a relationship of radical acceptance. Providing a safe environment is one of the greatest gifts you can offer to another person. We long to know that another accepts us at our very worst. We are convinced of this. The fear that we'll be rejected is banished. We don't have to hide our unattractive sides. I told you, I didn't grow up with sisters or anything like that. I had a mom, but just hair bothers me. I will never forget that tornado-looking thing on the wall. I don't understand. Can't you just take that and put in the trash can? The hospital's my mom. Right? But that first, I remember, oh man, she would kill me if she's not here. So, on our wedding night, for my wedding, I don't remember much. And it was just a hectic day, but you know what I do remember? The one thing I do remember, I'm like, if this is the altar, I'm standing here, I'm waiting, and the church we were at, long church, and the doors being wide open, and my beautiful bride is standing there in her beautiful dress. It's like lights were beaming on her. It's just so beautiful. So beautiful. She is still beautiful. She's still beautiful. But that day she was extra beautiful. Right? And that's all I remember. The next thing I remember is the next morning, right, after our first night as a couple, I wake up, and I look to her and I'm like, who are you? Why is your hair all over the place? What happened? What happened yesterday? You know? And I'm just half joking. Yeah, I'm half joking. But I really did say, who are you? Yeah, who are you? She was kind of got upset. But I'm just kidding. why do you have so much hair? Right? You accept each other for who they are. And I'm just telling, I'm sure she has so much crap on me, and I'm not going to share that. So, but when there is no fear of rejection, when there is an assurance of complete, committed acceptance, then we are free to be naked, right? I've been told there are 3 phases in marriage. There's the enchantment phase, the disenchantment phase, and the maturity phase. And it's in the maturity phase when we see the good and the bad, and we accept and embrace the whole person, and when you are free. Right? That's marriage. That's what it's supposed to be. Right? Where we don't reject one another, where we love one another, right? Unconditionally. And it's often through human relationships that God's grace and acceptance are experienced. We can know this in our minds, but it's when we feel the love, the full love of our parents, when we feel the full embrace of our spouse, or complete acceptance of a deep friendship, often that is what unlocks our heart to experiencing the gospel. We taste it. Church, we can preach the gospel to one another through our showing unconditional acceptance. We see the good, we see the bad, we accept the person, we demonstrate grace, gospel, and produce safe places in the church. Amen? You don't have to put on masks, is what I'm saying. Max Lucado, he tells this story in his book entitled No Wonder They Called Him Savior. So let me just read you this excerpt, the story that Max Lucado writes. He says, Maria and her daughter Christina lived on the outskirts of a Brazilian village. And Maria's husband had died when Christina was an infant. And the young mother got a job and set out to raise her daughter. And now, 15 years later, the worst year